Welcome to the Quintessential Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Quinn Shalloway. In today's episode, I have on Nick Deckard from eXp Realty, and we are going to discuss vacation markets, more specifically Ocean City, New Jersey. So this is I vacation in the Outer Banks as well as Ocean City throughout the year, and I have taken a little bit of an interest to the real estate there. And I figured it'd be great to just have someone on and talk about that market. So, Nick, thank you so much for coming on. And tell us a little bit about yourself. And we could take it from there.
I appreciate it, Quinn. I'm excited to share some knowledge and hopefully help your audience understand the realities of the market down here, because that's one of the things that potential buyers, investors have the biggest trouble really wrapping their head around. So I'll try to keep it concise, but also impactful, because it's a huge decision for sure. And you need to make an educated, confident decision. So a little bit about me. I have been in the real estate industry here in Ocean City for 5 years. Have loved helping dozens of families make sometimes hard decisions down here. I've become a little bit famous for talking people out of selling, which is a little bit the opposite of what people think we do as real estate agents, where we're just out to make a buck. But it's a very niche market, and every shore market, whether we're talking just in South Jersey or anywhere on the East Coast across the country, they have their own intricacies. So wherever you're looking, I highly encourage everybody to make sure you connect with somebody who knows what they're doing, who knows the market. And Quinn can definitely help you get connected no matter where you are looking in the country. It's the beautiful thing. As agents, we have broad networks of people we trust. So again, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to jumping in.
So let's start with this. When someone wants to get started, you want to, in any market, someone wants to get started, they want to find an agent. I feel like for Ocean City, it is such a specific market that I would want the best agent to help me through the transaction, whether it's to sell or to buy. You know, you can just click a Zillow link and they'll connect you with someone who's the highest bidder or buying that zip code. What is your recommendation for basically equipping yourself as a buyer or a seller who wants to do something in this market?
So the biggest thing that I talk about all the time here, right? Being in a market, in a coastal market, flooding is something that we battle with, right? There's nuisance, there's all kinds of different flooding that occurs, routine flooding, and then there's major flooding as well, and everything in between. It's very hard to truly be able to speak to the impacts that has on neighborhoods, on streets, on homes, if you don't live here. Of the over 500 agents we have with our board of realtors here in Ocean City, the overwhelming majority do not reside on the island. So when it comes to that, a lot of families that I have helped who already owned here to buy their next home and sell what they already have, they sold it after just 1 to 2 years typically, because of a factor that their previous agent didn't make them aware of. And when I say that, I'm not saying beware of disclosure issues. Obviously, you should always be wary of those. But it's things like flooding again. If you don't know to ask certain questions and an agent isn't out there trying to educate you, especially if it's going to cost them, right, a sale, that's going to put you at a disadvantage to make a potentially bad decision. And what that means is that you are going to have to make an even harder decision in a short period of time, because it's expensive to upgrade or downgrade or move, right? Between closing costs and everything that comes with selling a home, especially a second home, right? There's no capital gains tax breaks on a second home or an investment home. It doesn't exist. So you have to really be cautious of getting it right the first time if you can. Make sure that you find somebody who understands and you feel understands your objectives. And how most people have found me is through my YouTube channel or my Facebook group. People are generally out there looking to get educated. And most agents have no presence outside of an ad, right? Hey, use me. I'm the number one agent. We must have at least 23 to 24 number one agents in Ocean City, right? There's nothing behind that. Nobody is sanity checking to make sure that that is not false advertisement. So for buyers or sellers, number one, most of the deals down here and most transactions happen through past and prior relationships, whether that is a recommendation or a referral from a friend who used an agent or the agent that they previously used. Um, that's I think the biggest point is again making sure that you can learn from the agent in advance instead of putting yourself in a pressure situation, trying to make an emotional decision with somebody who you don't have rapport with, who you don't understand where they're coming from and how they operate.
I would imagine too, with a lot of these agents who are successful, like you said, they've lived there and they've lived there for a long time. So those relationships are really tight knit in the community. So that adds a lot of value. But are there, and also there's a lot of people who have owned their, vacation home or their primary home in this community for so long. How much of this market, when there are transactions, would you say are done privately?
I would say less than 5%. They do exist, but they're pretty rare. And a bulk of that 5% are going to be selling to developers anyway, not even necessarily to an end user. Those do happen, but again, they're pretty rare, all things considered, because even despite all of the tight relationships, right, the few large brokerages down here that have the bulk of the market share, they can do a lot in house. But most of the time, that is not in the best interest of their client, of their seller. So again, my advice to anybody who's looking to sell a house is you want to test the open market, right? You want competition. Unless you are confidently getting a value well above what is considered the reasonable market value, and you feel good about it, then hit the open market. Because if you have what you think you have, you will get a phenomenal price for it. Now, one other thing that I want to mention too that impacts a lot of these deals down here is rental history and rental income, and I'm sure we'll talk a whole lot about this. But if you are looking to seek advice, right, from an agent to buy or sell, you want to make sure you understand either the history or the potential rental potential of a home that you're buying, because that feeds a lot of the values down here as well.
All right, so yeah, let's dig into that, because one of the factors that I think a lot of people think about Ocean City as a destination is, hey, this is where we take our kids, but maybe I can't fully afford a secondary mortgage. I'm gonna rent out for part of the year or something along those lines. I could do VRBO, Airbnb. I could have a broker, take care of this. What can I mean? Like, what's the reality of that? So, because that is from my perspective, that is where the lion's share of the people need to be educated on what it takes to do that, on top of having the funds to do that. And you are
Yep.
taking also, like you said, there's got to be great rental history to be able to support that in underwriting for a mortgage.
Yes. And unless you're doing a DSCR loan, which, they're rare down here, all things considered. I have a couple clients who have um, sought those out and they worked very well for them. But generally speaking, most banks and lenders down here won't really consider the rental income, the short term rental income. They may, but most do not. So you need to qualify on your income and your income alone most of the time. Again, don't take that as ironclad, but that's typical. So, as far as rental expectations go, I have had a lot of conversations with people who say, hey, I want basically free vacation. I want to own a property, be able to come down a week or two for myself during peak season, mind you. Oh, by the way, I want to make money. I want to cash flow positive. Put the minimum down 20%, and I'm going to be making money and I'm going to get free vacation. This is going to be great. That is not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen. We are so far removed from that possibility. Maybe 20 years ago, when Ocean City wasn't quite as well known nor as popular as it is now, maybe it was possible. Again, my dad was in this industry 30, 35 years prior to me entering. So we have a wealth of knowledge as to what the realities are down here. And what I would encourage anybody out there listening to this, if you're thinking about buying a home down here specifically, do not think of it in terms of necessarily positive cash flow. There's a lot of reasons to buy a home down here. And I like to say it's on a sliding scale. Either you're a strict primary or secondary home user, you're not going to rent it out at all. You're on one part of that scale. or you're a full on investor. You're never going to step foot in the property, right? And there's everything in between. Most people fall somewhere on that sliding scale, or everybody does. It's just a matter of where. So if you're going to be buying and owning down here, number one, it's not going to be for strict cash flow, right? If you're an investor and you're looking for the best cash flowing asset you can find, it's not going to be in Ocean City, New Jersey. There are probably hundreds of other markets around the country that are better for strict cash flow. Where Ocean City really shines typically is in appreciation over time. Now, that is something that we cannot sit here and guarantee, right? We cannot bank on and say, hey, over the next 5 years, your home will be worth 10% more than it is today. That's why you should buy this. We can't say that. And I'm very careful not to say that. So the rental potential definitely does change block by block, house by house. You need to have, I'll say, even a team. And I don't handle rentals myself. There's a friend of mine, his name is Steve. He has an actual property management company, does a phenomenal job. I trust him in running analyses for me. I do my own, but if I have somebody super serious who really wants to know and there's no history, or even if there's a history and we don't feel that maybe it was maximized, we can get you an actual projection if you're able to do short-term rentals throughout the off season as well versus the normal weekly rentals during the summer. There's a lot to look at and a lot of factors that go into this. But the short version is if you're thinking of coming down here, putting 20% down and making money, it's not going to happen from a cash flow standpoint. So let's get that right out of the way. And there's many layers we can continue to go through, but I wanted to hit that one.
Yeah. So we have to look at this as primarily an asset and in a high appreciating community. And that's the play. And if you can make it work, that's where the payout is. And then, eventually maybe rates come down, you can refinance, and then it gets a little easier. Rents keep going up, that type of deal.
Yep.
So as an agent, you do, like, agents kind of, find their niche. Hey, we're gonna sell residential versus, hey, we're gonna, handle all of these, like, it's the question, it's the lever speech. It's like, do you want to do X amount all the way up here or only a few down here? You make the same amount. So you've got agents who are just renting properties. Is that a good kind of what it looks like, or?
Absolutely. You have, there are some agents that specialize just in rentals, right? Through a traditional brokerage, Berger Realty being the biggest one down here. They have the most rental listings out there. They have agents who specialize in rentals. Most of those agencies do have specific rental agents. There are some that do both, and there are many who just specialize in sales.
What's the cost for that type of service?
Absolutely. So traditional brokerage, if you're just going to list exclusively with one, right, you're going to have one of those agencies out there trying to fill up your books. Typically, it's 12% off the top. If you want to list with more than one rental agency, that typically jumps up to 15%. Sometimes you can negotiate in that range. It's uncommon for that to be negotiable. It's pretty hard and fast across the board. And then what's unique, again, there's a couple other options on either side of those too. There's VR OCNJ. If you want to do this yourself, Dwayne, who runs VROCNJ.com, has a phenomenal, I'll say, customer base, and his website gets a ton of traffic. A lot of bookings happen through there, and there are no fees paid to anybody. It's just an annual, basically a subscription for him to market your property for you. You handle the paperwork, you handle the funds. He has lease templates, there's trainings, all kinds of stuff. That's if you're a do-it-yourselfer, that's worth exploring. If you want the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to do anything whatsoever. Property management companies are hard to come by down here, full, true property management companies, because a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the rental agency is a property management company. They're not. They're not. If the toilet gets clogged and a plumber needs to get out there, the rental agent has to call you, the owner, right? You're on a golf course, you got to pick up the phone and you have to approve it. They can't just do it, which kind of takes some of the luster away, in my opinion. So Steve, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, he runs Heavenly Res, which is a full service property management company. They do everything. They have cleaners in house. They post to Airbnb, to VRBO, to everywhere under the sun. Great tech stack behind them. Every client that I've referred to them. They're thrilled with the experience and the results of that. And again, this may change in the future. I would recommend reaching out to Steve to discuss, but that's for 15% as well. Normally, full service property management is somewhere between 20 to 30% plus, especially in vacation markets. But Steve and his team do a great job. It's a great product. In my opinion, it's the best value out there if you're looking to generate income on your property.
Yeah, that sounds good. Because I know there's a lot of people who say, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it myself. Or I'll handle all of this. And yeah, do you really want to be responding to toilet clogs at 8:30 on a Saturday night? That gets old. I mean, there is value to sweat equity, just make a couple more extra bucks and whatnot. And if the numbers were tight when you bought it, you probably have to just do that. But as the equity in the home grows and whatnot, and just the rents go up, there's probably a budget for a property management company. Yeah, people just, it's a cost of doing business down there. But also you want it to be stress free, because it's a vacation home for a lot of these people who, like you said, it's a spectrum, right? And some of them are on that sliding scale and they're closer to, hey, I at least want, 1 or 2 weeks or a weekend down here to enjoy my property. But that definitely takes away some of the stress. And again, it's an appreciation play. It's not a, cash flow in a lot of cases. Let's talk about different streets. So you got to that, how many roads are there on the island?
So depending, Ocean City is mostly a grid, right? Where it's very, very clear cut, you know where you're going. Until you get all the way to the north end, it's the Gardens neighborhood where things start swirling around. So if we chop off the Gardens, right, because it's nearly impossible to measure in blocks because everything is more curvy down there. Around First Street, you're basically at the widest point on the island, which is around Sixth Street. You're at about a mile and a half wide on the island, which is not terrible. Um, but we have all different types of properties, different neighborhoods, and depending on what your objectives are, right? If everyone wants to be beachfront, totally understand that, right? But most people don't have the budget for that. We have to go through a process of trying to find the optimal street based off of what your goals are, right? And if you're generating income, that's going to steer us one way. If you want peace and quiet, right, and more space, you want a little yard for your dog, for your kids, whatever it is, that's another place. And more often than not, sacrifices have to be made in one way or another in order for a purchase to happen down here. And there's I'll call it a fake stat that I feel like it's true. I haven't measured it. But if 100 people are looking to buy down here, eventually over time, only 10 will. And that came from my dad years ago. And I feel that it is true. And it's not out of people lacking motivation, lacking intention, lacking financial ability. These are serious people who really want to have a home down here, whether it's an investment or personal use. But the prices down here are very hard to swallow. The lack of cash flow for years, if you're going to be renting even, is hard for a lot of people to get around. This is a luxury purchase. This is not something that everybody can do. It's not something that everybody should do. Over time, a lot of families have built generational wealth by taking the risk up front of saying, hey, look, I know this doesn't feel like the best financial choice right now, but we're in it for the long game. As you said, rents will likely rise, even if it's slightly over time, but that compounds. If you're able to refinance or pay your mortgage down, now you're cash flowing. As you're appreciating, you now have this phenomenal asset, whether it's to pass on to your kids someday, whether it's to retire down here, which some people have done. There's a lot you can do with it. So it's worth exploring, and I hope that stat doesn't scare anybody because there's always a way. I believe that there's always a way. But again, sometimes you're going to have to be 2 blocks further from the beach than you want to be. Maybe that's something you work up towards. That's a possibility. But as I said, selling here is expensive. Buying and selling multiple times is expensive. So I like to future cast with clients that I sit down with and say, well, what's the end game look like for you here, right? Let's paint a perfect picture. What does it look like? And let's see if we can't find a way or find a property that is flexible enough that it works for you now and will likely work for you 10 plus years from now too.
Yeah. That's a good point. What works 10 years from now? Because, just on the regular residential side over where I'm at, it's, I'm telling people, 7 to 8 years, probably 10. You got to look at it like that. And hopefully you've got the appreciation for it. But I would imagine with this, it's so much more of a long-term view for this type of transaction. And it's like, I would imagine that there are, obviously there's very affluent people who are buying in the market. So sometimes money is not an object. And that's who you have to compete against. And do you see many people buying a home, then selling it, and then leaving the market, and then trying to buy back in, and then realize like I can't buy back in for what I once had? How much real estate regret are you seeing in your market?
So I haven't seen any over the past year or two. Where a lot of it happened was during COVID, or during 2021 and 2022 specifically. Some during 2020 as well, right? People saw this market run up along with markets around the country and said, "Ha, watch this, right? I'm going to capitalize here. I'm either going to buy across the bridge where I'm no longer in Ocean City. I'm in a different county, possibly. Give it a year or two, and I'll sell that and buy right back at a discount. It's going to be phenomenal. Watch. Yeah, you're stuck. You're not making it back. You tried to time the market, and that is a losing strategy down here, especially. So I have story after story, not of clients of mine, thankfully, as I mentioned at the start of this. I've become famous among at least my clients for talking them out of selling, and they're grateful that I have. I had several call during that period of time I just mentioned and say, "Hey, we're ready to cash out." I said, "Well, let's sit down and have a conversation. You don't have to justify anything to me. If at the end of the day you want to sell your asset, by all means, I'm happy to help you. But let me make sure that you understand the risks of doing this, what your plans are." And I'm no financial advisor. I do not act as a financial advisor, accountant, lawyer, any of those other things. But I've seen enough people and heard enough stories to help people avoid making mistakes. So most often, if somebody wants to sell their home, I'll simply ask them, "What are your plans? What are you going to do with your proceeds?" And most of the time it's, "Well, I'm not quite sure." Well, before you make a mistake, you might want to understand what you're going to do with this hefty chunk of money, what the tax implications, tax consequences are going to be of selling this, right? Do you know what a 1031 exchange is? If you're looking to downsize here, there's ways to do this and not haplessly lose money, right? That you have worked so hard for, that would really make this, I'll say, a wash or even a loss versus a huge gain.
Yeah, I think the 1031 point is an interesting one, especially if you're going to be using that tax code to try to, leverage it into another property in a very low inventory market. It's one of those hard things. Like once you settle on a property, it's a ticking time. It's a ticking time bomb to identify that next property, so you don't have to pay those 30% or whatever gains on it. And it's not impossible, but
There's strategies, and there's multiple of them. And again, I don't want to turn this into a 1031 a thon over here, but it's possible to do a reverse 1031 exchange where you identify the property you want to purchase first. And if you're able to do that, it's a little more costly with the intermediary that you're required to use through the process, because they have to do double the work essentially. But that could save you tens of thousands of dollars doing it that way, and the stress and the trouble of saying, "Hey, I found my home I want to buy. Let's get an offer. Let's get it under contract. Now let's list ours." Trying to get ours under contract. Oh, heck, we got kicked out of the other one because we had a home sale contingency, and now we're just taking everything off the market. There's financial capital and there's emotional capital in this process, and I talk about that in my onboarding sessions with clients. Of, look, we need to be mindful of both of these things, because too often people come down here unprepared. They get excited about something. Oh, wait, they didn't qualify. Oh, that's unfortunate. You can't afford what you really loved. So now you have this anchor point, this false anchor point. You're going to compare everything to that, even though that is out of your budget. We're going to be looking in your budget, and you're just going to be frustrated. all the time. And now you're one of the 90 people, the 90% that don't end up buying down here because you jumped the gun, right? You had a false start. And I try to help people avoid that.
So as far as like affordability goes, just from types of homes, it matters where you are on the island. But if you were going to look for, let's just block, what does $500,000 get you? What does $1 million get you? Where, people are just, I would imagine, most people who say, we want to buy a vacation home and do Airbnb, that is the price point that they're probably able to come up with that amount of cash if they want to be a first time, vacation homeowner or something along those lines. So you're probably having a lot of those conversations. So where are you kind of pointing them? And that's probably one of the more competitive, I would imagine. But how would you kind of respond to that?
So under $500,000, it's very hard to find a whole lot. You're generally going to be looking at one bedroom or efficiency units. And a lot of those, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them are in what we call condo tails, which is a certain property type down here that is definitely not for everybody. Flanders, there's a bunch. They tend to be more near the beach and the boardwalk. Those properties, there are owner use limits to where you can't use your own property for more than 30 days per quarter. The city put those laws in place to basically keep the school system protected from people who could buy a cheap property, put 10 kids in the school system and not really, be paying for it. But those come with a steep, usually 30 to 35% property management cost through the building and the association that runs everything, in addition to your monthly condo fees. So they're not inexpensive to own, but they're truly hands off, right? You have a front desk checking and checking out all that stuff. But if you don't care about rental income, then that's definitely not going to work. There are painfully few two bedrooms that will sell under $500,000 these days. It's still possible. They tend to be, at best 500 to 600 square feet, not large. Most lack parking, lack storage. They lack a lot of things. So if you really are looking for a true starter property down here, it's doable within that range, but we will have to be very picky. If you have a budget of up to $1 million, you can get a fair amount of 3-bedroom units in a duplex. You can have your pick of pretty much any 2-bedroom unit on the island. So that's where between the 500 and $1 million, you really start to see some choices. And there's a lot of choices, again, when it comes to what your goals are, what part of the island you like, which part of the island gets you closest to your goals. And a lot of that conversation I have with people before they come down for the first time, speaking with both decision makers, assuming there's two, making sure that they understand what their goals are. And I don't mean that to sound, know-it-all-y in any kind of way, but I've found very frequently that spouses have different goals. They think they're on the same page, but they're really not. And I've had families come down here, right? Oh, we found the perfect home, says one, and the other says, oh no, this? No way. And instead of having those, again, emotional highs and emotional lows and some tension and friction there, if we can get out ahead of all of that and really map out what makes sense, what person number one wants, what person number two wants, what are they willing to give and take, we can make the process less stressful, less emotionally taxing. And again, I find that that's at least half the battle. The financial battle is black and white, right? We know what we can afford. We know what we can't. We can project what the rental income is, as you mentioned, all the costs associated with owning a home down here. We know all that ahead of time. We can't change most of that, but it's the emotional and mental piece that I find stops most people rather than the financial one.
All right. Let's talk about the black and white, like you said, the numbers. Got your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and now we have flood insurance, right? So how much of a factor is that on the island? Is it all the same? Is it much more expensive on north side, south side, close to the beach, bay side? How's that kind of look as we're trying to figure out a monthly payment that works, whether we're going to rent it out or we're going to keep it all year round? That really does eat into your buying power.
It does. It does. One thing to get out of the way is most of the flooding comes from the bay side of the island. Most people do not know that. So as a result, if that's where the risk is, that's where the flood insurance may be higher. I'm not going to say always is, because it depends. If your house is raised, fully lifted to current elevation standards, has everything needed to minimize your flood insurance, there are things you can do. Flood vents being one of them. Basically, a way to let the water in and keep it out during a flooding event. It could be very inexpensive, honestly. It could be less than $1,000 a year for the building. But the good news is, again, if you're looking at properties, I'll just speak for me personally, we can find that out ahead of time, up front. I have spreadsheets for everything under the sun. And we can look at a property before you even come down, sometimes before we even talk about it, and say, here's what your monthly cost is going to be. Yes, there will be some utilities estimates that I'll plug in, but we can find out what those insurance premiums are currently. The general liability piece, which is the other insurance that's required on a duplex or any building, really, and the flood insurance. So we can know most of those costs going into it. Taxes included, if there's any shared expenses like landscaping, any of that stuff we can factor in. And it does add up. The biggest surprise to most people is the water and sewer bill down here. When I moved back here, and I grew up here but lived in Maryland for 9 years in between. When I moved back here, my quarterly water bills back in Maryland were about $75 to $100. It's great, water and sewer. That became my monthly bill here in a small 990 square foot home, which was the first one that I bought here. That was an eye opener to me, to most people that don't spend any time here other than the summer. You still have water and sewer bills the entire year. How those are determined, and again, I can go down the rabbit hole here, but basically, it's something that you want to make sure you understand, because a lot of people aren't educated up front, and they say, why do I have a water bill for $75 in December? I've been there in 4 months. Well, that's because you used a ton of water during the summer months, and how the water company allocates their service charge is based on that summer usage, and then they split it out over the remaining 9 months in increments as well. So the routine maintenance bills can definitely add up. Power washing that you'll definitely have to do annually or biannually. Down here, all little things that do add up. And again, if you're looking black and white, if you're looking at this, your ROI on, opportunity number one would be blank, and, opportunity number two would be slightly higher or less. You really have to make sure you're accounting for everything in there.
No, that's really good. I mean, the fact that you can determine a lot of these things before you step inside of a house, that's invaluable.
Yeah, and thankfully, again, like you said, it's all the relationships that we have down here. Agents who have been doing this a while, we know a lot of us know each other very well. It's a quick phone call. It's, hey, I have somebody that I think will be a fit for your listing. Can you shoot me the premiums for flood and liability real quick? Yeah, that's fine. Some agents, myself included, will put it in the MLS. I don't even have to call anybody. No one has to call me. Give everybody what they need to make a sound decision, not guess, because that's when contracts fall through. But I digress. Yeah, we can find all that out up front.
In Ocean City, what are some main reasons why contracts fall through? Because it's not a primary, so I would imagine it's a little different.
Yeah, the big two, and it may not be too different. The big two being home inspections and financing. Financing piece is more rare. Usually, right, our lenders down here and agents are good enough of getting things done up front versus winging it and saying, hey, let's throw in an offer. You haven't talked to anybody yet, not pre-qualified. We don't do that. That's where risk really comes up for that. But the home inspection piece is different, really, than the primary market for one major reason. You're buying a primary home, right? You are going to generally expect to have a lot of things fixed. That's my understanding of how primary markets work. You can certainly correct me there. Someone gets a home inspection, not nickel and diming, but hey, we want a lot of this stuff resolved, or credits for a lot of this stuff, depending on the market, obviously, and the speed of it. Down here, there are two categories of problems. One, related to moisture, right? In crawl spaces, we have a lot of, we'll call it organic growth, aka mold, that just happens. It happens in garages, it happens in crawl spaces. That freaks people out. Even if it can be remediated, which it all can, and it's not toxic, it's not dangerous, it's just, we're in a moist environment down here. A moist enclosed space is going to have some problems. Sometimes the sellers are willing to take care of that, sometimes they're not, right? If we're paying our average sale price right now is $1.28 million, so 1.25. Uh, if you're spending 1.25 and we're going to fight over $500, it's going to frustrate somebody, whether it's the buyer, the seller, or both. So perspective sometimes gets lost here, whether that's because that's how they've done it when they bought their primary homes. It's just another, again, I think, mindset piece coming into this, but it does result in a lot of contracts falling through due to the home inspection. And I've seen them fall through. Call the agent, hey, what happened? With the inspection, the buyer decided to walk. You know, did your seller approve that you can share that home inspection report? Oh yeah, here you go. There's nothing problematic in the least. So whether it was a I got cold feet moment or whether it was a, again, there's black mold in the garage. Cool. We deal with that all the time. Uh, but some people have, again, different expectations, um, different fears, and it's possible for some buyers to capitalize on that too. Right? There are opportunities to be had in properties that may have what some people deem to be problems. Whereas if you know the right people, the right contractors, it's really not a big deal. It's not going to be an expensive fix, and you can really get in at a good number and add some value right away.
What are homes typically selling for compared to their list price right now on the island? I'm in the Philly suburbs area. We see multiple offers. We see appraisal gap differences, being added into contracts, home inspection waivers, stuff like that. You're bringing up how home inspections are done primarily in Ocean City. Yeah. Where are homes selling versus where they're listed? What are days on market? Like what can you expect? And what can you also expect? Hey, it's only been sitting on the market for, if I take someone down, it's been sitting for 2 weeks, and I go, oh, they might be primed for a reduction, or they take a lower offer. What is the average time on market where you see price reductions, or a seller who's willing to kind of give the property away in their eyes?
One little plug here, shameless plug. I am a data nerd by trade. I was in corporate finance before I entered this field. On my YouTube channel, I put out usually twice a month market updates that are I'm not going to say highly technical. They're accessible to anybody, easily understandable by anybody. There's graphs that anybody can understand what's going on there. But that's really my specialty. That's where I really thrive. So as far as list to sale price, where we ended in November, for condos, it was about 97.5% of the asking price, and single families was 98.5% of the asking price. Days on market for singles is really pushing up around 60, where condos are still fluctuating just under 50. Um, but it's a little, again, context matters here. And that's why I do those videos, because the stats, right? If I were to make an Instagram post of just, hey, here's the numbers for this month or this week, two different people may look at that and come to two totally different conclusions.
Well,
So the context,
if you're not in the market and you hear
right?
60 days, you're gonna, if you're in my market, you're like, oh my gosh, they're crashing. They're crashing.
Yep.
We have maybe 1 to 2 months worth of inventory on, and it's like, but it operates differently in a vacation market.
Yeah, and the catch 22 here is most sellers don't need to sell, right? This was a luxury purchase, and most buyers don't need to buy. So it comes down to a stalemate, right? A game of chicken of who's going to give first. And again, that's where the 90% of buyers tend to get stuck, of just, well, I'm going to wait until they drop their price 20%. Well, that's never going to happen. And next year, you're going to need them to drop it 30%, and so on and so forth. Um, so as far as price reductions and all that, it's very, very property dependent. It is very situationally dependent. And a lot of properties never actually see a reduction too. Yet you'll see it then sell for sometimes six figures under asking. It just depends. And it's hard to emphasize that enough. So this time of year, I usually say it's deal season. With the price reductions, we have a lot of brokers open houses. If a house has been, and my strategy, if I'm working with a seller, helping somebody sell, hey, look, if we're still there after a week or two, because we price things, I aim to price things reasonably and appropriately. Whereas a lot of our inventory right now, and usually, is just the, hey, if I'll get this number, I'll sell. So most of our 240-ish active listings, in my opinion, are highly unmotivated sellers. It's if I can get it, I'll sell, which is part of what drives that higher days on market. Sometimes they'll be out there for months at a time before somebody decides, you know what, fine, it's the right property. I will give up the game of chicken. I'll pay the number. I want the home.
Yeah, they
So
just need one
that'll be
buyer. That's what they
it.
always say. We just need one buyer who wants to buy our home for this price. And they're not wrong. That's
They're not.
probably why they're willing to wait, and I see that all the time. But it sounds like too, you also got agents who are basically just buying listings. It kind of almost sounds like it's like, yeah, you want to list it, 2.5 million. Back in my mind, I go, it's probably worth 2. And I'll get paid as long as, hey, we're on 90 days. They're tired. Everybody's tired. Let's drop it down. And then that's how they get the listing. So I would imagine in a market like this, that does happen.
That's one of the things that I was trained to do, and I do not do it. I said that's one of the craziest things that I've heard. I understand it, right?
Oh, I've
Right?
lost listings because of it. I come out at a price and you're like,
Oh, yeah.
you're $60,000 less than the other agent. I'm like, they're just trying to buy your listing. Like, I want to, get you the value of your home with as many, contingencies out the door from the start. And, that's another question. So what are appraisals in that market? How do those go? So we're selling at, you said 98.5% of the value that it was listed for. That sounds like it's good news for an appraisal, right?
Yep. I don't even know the last time I heard a story, let alone saw one myself, of an appraisal that came in low, or a home that did not appraise. Years and years. Now that scares me a little bit. I'm not going to go off on that little tangent I could go on. But a lot of the time, people are coming down and paying well above 20% down anyway. So really, that appraisal, if it does come in $5,000 low, is a non-issue. But the appraisal conversation, I will just make one comment. I find it a little bit humorous how most appraisals come in right at or within $1,000 or $2 of the contract price. Just interesting to me.
They shoot for the value. That's what it is.
Yeah, so it's not a protective mechanism that people think it is, which makes the whole educational decision-making piece of this so much more important, for you to understand, again, not only what you're getting, but what any future improvements you can make, or what your future appreciation is likely to be based on where you're buying, the type of home you're buying, all that good stuff. You need to know.
So in a standard buyer offer, what does that standard offer kind of look like with contingencies on it? Comparing it to other markets. So I kind of think I get that's a nuanced question, but I'd be curious kind of what is kind of like, what do you see the most of? Like, are we getting home inspections?
Yeah.
Are we getting, what exactly are we seeing?
We're generally getting everything. Number one, our Ocean City standard contracts are very buyer friendly. They come laced with contingencies, and nothing crazy, but the home inspection, the mortgage contingency, condo doc review, because down here, even if you buy in a duplex, people see condo doc and they think, oh, I'm not buying in a condo complex. I don't need to worry about that. Every duplex, triplex, anything that's not a single family home is governed by condo documents or a master deed. And what those say matters. That impacts your ability to possibly rent for less than 7 days. It impacts your ability to have a pet if you decide to bring the dog down. Oh, wait, you can't do that. So there's a 10-day condo doc review. Now, again, usually we try to get those up front before you even make the offer, not waste anybody's time or emotional capital. But plenty of contingencies. Home sale contingencies are generally still fine, especially in the fall. Fall through, I'll say, mid to late January is your best bet of getting a home sale contingency accepted without having to overpay for the privilege of getting it accepted. Because how I couch that to people is, look, you need to pay the seller to accept some risk, right? To take it off the market for any period of time. And if you have competition, not only do you have to pay them for that, right? You may also then lose it before we get your home under contract. So the buyer side is very, very friendly. The seller side is pretty straightforward, but there's really not a whole lot of control that they typically have down here in the transaction.
Well, that's good. You have educated consumers then. A lot of times people are control over
That's
Yeah.
what they have control over, right?
Say it again?
The sellers have control over the price,
Well,
which I would
they
argue
have
is
control over
most
the
important.
price, but what I'm saying is just the fact of I've dealt with many people where we're looking at 20 different offers on a property, and do you want the property or not? I have lots of
Yeah,
conversations. They're like, Quinn, what is the number that we need to give so they accept it? And I'm like, well, it's multi. There's levels to this, and it's not
talk about
just
an escalation clause and
it's
shoot
not
for the
just
moon.
it's not just price. It's like, are we going to guarantee the price? Are we waiving a mortgage contingency? Are we
Yep,
putting a large amount down? What home inspections, like you don't see them a lot. So
yep,
there's a lot of times where that due diligence up front, like if you bring a home inspector through, or you prep them, but it's just hard to buy in certain markets. So that to me is at least what you're buying, and I like that. That is it's
oh,
such a
for sure.
big it's such a big investment that it's nice to know it's not like the markets I work in.
No, and what one last little nugget on that too, and those home inspections, obviously you always want to have them. I have a guy that I use and highly recommend for anybody having a home inspection down here that was in construction, owned his own construction business before it. So he's very, very thorough. But I have had buyers, right, say, oh, the AC condenser is very rusted. It's 8 to 9 years old. It's near the end of its useful life. We want them to replace it. Number one, it works fine. Right? There's nothing wrong with it. Yes, it is rusty because we're exposed to salt air. Things don't last as long down here. So from a budgeting standpoint, right, if you're going to own a home down here, you're going to have to replace things more often, especially metal things. But coming back to the $500, quarrel, I should say, quabble, I don't even think it's a word, quarrel I mentioned earlier, right? If we're spending the types of money we're spending down here, and we're going to fight over something that is not broken, that is totally fine, that you're going to have to replace all of them anyway, sooner than you want to, are you willing to risk this home over that? Because most people, we don't have a lot of options. We have 240 total listings out there. At best, you have one or two choices. Are you comfortable maybe waiting another 2, 3 years before you find another one? Number one, that checks all the boxes this one does. And number two, isn't going to have the same problems, right? And in all likelihood, 2 to 3 years from now, you're going to be paying more anyway. So what having those hard conversations, you know, as you can relate to, kind of is the job,
Oh
and
yeah,
it's
it's
not
just
putting
problem
in place.
solving. It's basically just laying everything out there, letting them make their decisions. You're just an advisor. Um, how long is so if someone wants to buy, I mean, what's the length of time you're working with these clients? I understand that varies, but it kind of sounds like you could.
Generally speaking, it's 1 to 2 years before somebody will buy. I had one referral that came down maybe 2.5 weeks ago now, for the first time, and put in a contract the next day. And I literally told them the day before they came down, I said, "Hey, expect that this is going to be a 1 to 2 year process. We're going out here to get educated, right? I think there's one that you'll like, but at the same time, right? No expectations from me. There should be no expectations from you. Um, we need to be careful and diligent about this process for all the reasons that we've talked about so far, right? With all of the things you have to make sure you're aware of. It's a lot. So now that's what I'm here for, right? Shoulder that burden and just make sure that I understand what you're looking for so I can save as much time and energy as possible by not even bringing things to you that won't be a fit. Don't spend your life scrolling through Zillow, sending me 10 things a day. I do that. Except it's not Zillow, it's the MLS. I'm on this. You have to have some level of trust that I've got you covered. Um, and from there, the more we see you and the more time we spend together, the better lens I have carved out for you. And we will find the property, but again, generally 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, no, that I mean, from your kind of perspective, this long sales funnel is it's got to be really just difficult because these check-ins and whatnot is like you're earning their business for 2 whole years, and you need to keep giving them kind of education points, values, and those strategy sessions will be coming up much more often than someone you're just working with with a couple of weeks. So I would imagine that is kind of why there's probably a lot of agents who say, yeah, I'm going to come into this market. I'm going to make a lot of money. And then they're like, you're not going to buy for 2 years. I have to pay my dues and all this stuff for 2 years till I get my first one under contract. So I would imagine that is just that's a crazy mental game to play as an agent. And it does take time to get into any market, but sounds like I would say, after about 6 months or so, I was kind of up and running. And then, 12 months, you're from jogging to running. Now we're full on sprint, but sounds like it takes a little bit longer unless you just, even if you have some marketing spend behind you, the buyer or the seller is not going to be immediate. I mean, there's people who just, hey, the gun was loaded. They were already hunting before they came across you, and they say, hey, we like Nick. We're going to just go buy this property and he's going to help us on it. But, it's
fortunately, that's why I decided to build my business the way that I did, was through video, through education, through sharing data, through all that stuff, because the amount of, again, time's the one resource we don't have enough of, we will never get back. And that goes on both sides of this, right? For the client and for me as the agent. So the more that clients can educate themselves, right, on their own time, through those videos, through the posts, through everything that I put out there, it benefits both of us. So we're not having the same conversation 100 times. And it's nobody has accused me of being lazy taking that approach. What it does is shorten that funnel again. And really the biggest problem down here is that agents get so hungry for business that they start chasing, right? And I'm not going to use the word harass, but sometimes it's bordering on that. Nobody likes that. No customer of any business likes that feeling. And that's something that I promised I would never do. So this whole process of making sure that you have access to everything for free, right? This isn't, you have to sign up with me before you can see my videos or any of that stuff. That's where most of my business comes from, as people have been watching for 6 months, right? For a year, sometimes for a day. And they call when they're ready and say, hey, I feel like I know you. I understand how you do business. I like that. Will you help me? So from my side, it's again, I'm not justifying over the course of 2 years why I have value, which has made my life more enjoyable and a little less stressful. But at the same time, some people I'm sure have seen my videos and see that I dress in a t-shirt most of the time. And they say, oh, that's not my guy. I can't work with him. Great. Then don't. that's okay. We're not going to get along with everybody, and I'm not the right fit for everybody, and not everybody's the right fit for me. That's okay. It's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And, honestly, I think that's why I reached out, because, I definitely come from it at that standpoint of just, we need to educate people who are the ones buying or selling this, this piece of real estate. It's not me, I'm an advisor. So if I can get other people who are of like mind on this show to just talk about this, and then they can realize we need to find advocates for us who are going to educate us, or at least just give us all of the information we need so we can make an educated decision. And then when the time comes to negotiate or problem solve, we know that this person is equipped to do that. Then we can do the hand raising, and they can execute for us. So that's kind of why that is why you're on here today, Nick. I appreciate your time. Last, just plug this, plug all your socials. You said you are an admin for a New Jersey group. So take it away.
Yep, absolutely. So the two main channels, the first one really being YouTube. It's Living in Ocean City, and I'll shoot you the link to that too. And then the Facebook group, which arguably has the most information, because I do post the videos there as well, plus a bunch of different stats and facts and all kinds of stuff, is Tips for Buying in OCNJ. That's on Facebook. And the reason that I created that, because all of the probably 17 plus Ocean City Facebook groups are full of everything under the sun, most of which is non-real estate related, which is great. It's fine. People want to know if there's flies on the beach that day. They want to complain about they had a bad breakfast. More power to you. But again, time is everything. And if you want to find a place where you're just getting advice and data and information to make a good decision, that's what I created. That's why I created that group and that place where people can ask questions. There's no sales pressure. There's no anything ever. If you want to work with me, great. I've had at least 3 people that I'm aware of who have joined the group, followed the videos, done everything to reach out after they've closed on their house, working with another agent, saying, "Thank you so much for all your information." And I say, "That's phenomenal, right? Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you used it and were able to make the best decision possible for you." That's why it's there. And as much as I would love to work with everybody, I can't. So it's okay. So even if you have an agent that you're committed to, if you, you just want a place to get some more information, check them both out. And beyond that, in 2025, I will be circling back to Instagram. I can't say I'm going to commit to TikTok, but if I'm doing short form video, I might as well. Um, so you can find me on there. I'm sure if you search Nick Deckard, you'll find me pretty quickly on both of those.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing about the Ocean City market. So thanks, Nick.
Absolutely, Clint.